All right, we should be live on the page. Just give it a few seconds, John, to make sure that the stream is going strong. And looks like we are up, and you can start welcoming people in, John.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Welcome, Star Wars fans. We have a exclusive speaker series edition tonight, Tuesday, for the Virtual Cantina Network. I'm so excited for the two gentlemen that are joining us this evening. I've met them once or twice before, and I've been a big admirer of their work. And so I hope that you'll get to know these two gentlemen a little bit better this evening. So without further ado, welcome to this exclusive Star Wars Celebration guest speaker session on artwork for the forthcoming Star Wars Celebration event. Welcome, first of all, Joe Corroney. Joe is originally from Indianapolis. He's a freelance illustrator at Disney and Lucasfilm. Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
Hey, Jonathan. Hey, everyone. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good. Nice to meet you, Joe. Also, we have joining us Brian Miller, originally from Missouri. He's the co-founder of Octopolis Illustration, as well as co-founder and creative director of Hi-Fi Color Design, which includes work for Disney, Fox, Lucasfilm, and Fandango. How are you doing, Brian? Nice to meet you.
Very good. It's such a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this chat tonight.
Great. So I'm really excited for you to get to know you guys a little bit better, for our members to learn a little bit more about you and to introduce you to your work. So that's kind of the theme of the evening. So a little bit about Joe and Brian. If you didn't know, they've collaborated on many different types of work over the years, particularly artwork production. I think one of the things I first noticed you collaborated on was 1000 Levels Down, which was in Star Wars Insider 151, as well as Tarkin Revealed, Star Wars Insider 153. So I don't know if that's where you guys started collaborating or whether you collaborated earlier than that, but that was when I first noticed your kind of co-work. Is that correct?
I'm just happy. I'm happy you noticed us. That's awesome. Yeah, we've collaborated long before, and many insiders previous to those. Those were ones that probably came out around 2015 or so, I think. So maybe 2014, I'm not sure. But we've been collaborating since like 2006, I believe. But we've known each other. We were friends for about 10 years prior to that. So, but our first official collaboration, which was for Star Wars, and it was for Star Wars Insider. It was the first reveal of General Grievous. Actually, this would have been 2005, not 2006. Brian and I collaborated on some General Grievous artwork for that issue, and it was before Revenge of the Sith had come out, and it so this would have been like January, February, and it was the big reveal of the character to fans everywhere, even before he showed up in the trailer, I think, or around that same time. But we were the first artists outside of ILM to get to illustrate General Grievous. So that's going back to 2005.
When I saw your first sketch was the first time I'd seen him, I was just like, yeah. What is this? Holy smokes, this is crazy.
I know, it's so crazy. Yeah. I got all this awesome reference from Lucasfilm and ILM, like all these like pre-animatics and pre-visualization pieces of him, and that I got to work from. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's great. So you said, you collaborated together down the years and produced some amazing artwork as far as I'm concerned, both individually and in collaboration. But what I want to do, I want to start from the beginning, right? I want to go back to the day that you were first introduced to Star Wars. So my first question is, when did your kind of Star Wars story begin? Can you tell us when and how did you become fans? So Brian, do you want to kick that one off?
Well, I think, every time this question is asked, I dig into my memory because I don't know what's real and what's filled in over the years. But I think for me, I'm pretty sure I had access to the toys before I saw the film. So I remember playground recess as a kid with like Luke and the land speeder and the droids and just playing Star Wars. And I'm trying to think was it the re-release where I saw the movie the first time, or what? It's hard to put all those pieces together because you're such a little kid. But I definitely remember having like coloring books and sticker books and trading cards and toys, and like Star Wars was like life at that age. So I think I may have actually like been aware of the characters before I even saw the film. And so then when I did see the movie, it just like, it like really blew my mind, because I even had like the inflatable lightsaber. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was probably really lame, but it was like this, basically a flashlight that you had to like blow up.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Inflatable lightsaber. And the flashlights were so weak back then, you had to like go into like a dark closet or basement or something to even like have it like where you could see it. But it didn't matter because you're a little kid and you're just like, this is awesome, I have a lightsaber. So like that was my introduction as a child. And like, I mean, I don't know, I feel like my whole childhood was like Star Wars and G.I. Joe, right? And that was it. And so Star Wars is like just part of who I am ever since then.
That's wonderful. Joe, how about you?
I mean, pretty similar actually. I Star Wars was the first film I remember seeing in the theater as a child. So this was 1977, and I was barely 4 years old. I think I was just not quite 4, because my birthday was in July and Star Wars came out in May, and we saw it sometime either just before or right around my birthday there. But I remember seeing it in the theater, and it just totally captivated my imagination. Like Brian said, from that point forward, Star Wars was life. So to grow up back when that first film came out and Star Wars was just, I mean, it was all we could talk about and all we could think about, and all, and the toys came out a year later, and it was, that was a constant collecting and playing with the Star Wars toys all the way through, through all those early years of the classic trilogy. So I think right when Star Wars had come out, and for my 4th birthday, my mom had got me the Marvel Comics adaptation of Star Wars, and that inspired me to want to draw comics. I would draw from that. I would draw the characters, because back then that's how we relived the movie, was through like the comics and the toys, because we didn't, there was no VHS yet. There was obviously no DVDs or anything like it is now. But so Star Wars was so inspiring. I just kept rereading those Marvel comic adaptations and playing with the toys, and I would draw the action figures. I would tell my own stories with my drawings and my action figures. So it's just, Star Wars introduced me to movies and introduced me to comic books. It introduced me to artwork. It sort of is the genesis of everything, pretty much, of who I am today.
That's a great story. One thing, real quick, growing up in the UK, we didn't have toys or comics or Star Wars. They weren't readily available until Empire Strikes Back. But I do remember going to see the original Star Wars. I was 8 years old, because I'd won a contest for 2 free tickets and a blue milk, which is like a powder sachet. You pour in milk and stir it up. I remember getting 3rd prize.
This is pre-Galaxy's Edge too. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you kind of touched upon it a little bit, Joe and Brian, a little bit about, where your kind of fandom started, what, how you got interested in Star Wars, and then, drawings and playing with toys, etc. So the next question is, growing up then, beyond the first movie then, and into the future then. So what kind of concept artists or film artwork did you draw early inspiration from? I know you were saying that you kind of drew or made some art out of maybe figures or comics or anything, but kind of later in life then, was there any kind of concept artists or film artwork that you drew early inspiration from? A lot of artists, like you mentioned, Ralph McQuarrie, but, were there any other inspirations? Like, for me, I love George Akimoto and René Magritte, they do wonderful work for cinema posters. Tell us a little bit about where your early inspirations came from in terms of style.
Why don't you go first, Brinks? I know you've got some interesting ones.
I mean, for me, like, I know what Joe's is, and I'll just say that I share his too, but like Sid Mead was a huge influence on me as a kid, and beyond even things like Blade Runner, because Sid Mead did a lot of futurism, and I feel like either Mead or maybe other similar futurists would contribute to like Omni magazine a lot. And that was one of the magazines that always had like amazing cover art. And I would go into like the school library and you would see it sitting there, you know, Omni with that super futuristic looking logo. And there would always be some like amazing piece of cover art there. And I'd, even if I was too young to know who the artist was, I'd study it and look at it and flip through it and everything. So I think a lot of that futurist stuff really inspired me, which is ironic when you look at my art because it's so heavily influenced by retro and vintage, which is what I'm into. But I think at an early age, what sucked me in first was all that future sci-fi stuff. And then that opened the door for me to discover things that had come before, right? So I started at this like modernism like type thing or futurism, and then I got to start taking steps backwards. So I would get to like mid-century modern, and then I would take a step back to like, you know, the Art Deco period or the Art Nouveau period, and just discover these little niche parts of artwork that were new to me and exciting to me. And I was like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. And so it's just like a sponge, just like absorbing all this stuff, so that when it came time for me to start sort of like creating my own illustrations and finding my own voice, I had all these little pockets of inspiration to draw from, to where I could start to, you know, assimilate that into what do I like? What am I about? What is my voice as an artist? And it's, you know, taken years or decades, but I feel like I have that voice, I have that style now. And hopefully when people see my artwork, they can recognize that, oh, that's got to be Brian's. It looks kind of like this other thing he did. And so it's nice when you feel like you've been able to streamline all of that into like a signature style.
Got it. And so, Brian, sorry, Joe, how about you? What were your inspirations in terms of art?
As
style?
far as like before the film artists, really, I became probably more aware of who those artists were. I would say maybe even just before that were some comic book artists by the time I had gotten into grade school that I really admired. But I do remember at the same time, though, as far as like film artists and or movie related artwork, when I was collecting the Star Wars trading cards for Topps, and some of the cards that were included were Ralph McQuarrie paintings, and I remember looking at those trading cards going like, wow, they look like Star Wars, but they weren't images from the movie. Like they were paintings and they were drawings, and I was like, well, they're slightly different versions of the characters, and those really fascinated me. And I remember being captivated by Ralph McQuarrie's artwork on the Topps trading cards back when those first sets came out. They had like the blue set and the red set and the orange and the green sets, and I still have all those cards too. And then along with those trading cards, I remember getting the official like Star Wars sketchbook and the Empire Strikes Back sketchbook, and they were these paperbacks about, you know, they were horizontal more or less, about yay long. And there was a Return of the Jedi sketchbook, and all those pre-production drawings of like the AT-ATs and Jabba's sail barge and, you know, the Ewoks and all these things. And I remember looking at those sketches from like Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie, and those were inspiring to me and to my Star Wars art at an early age, because then made me feel comfortable to draw how I, like to sketch and to do ink drawings or even really rough marker pieces based off of what I didn't understand this, maybe necessarily that was how concept art was done. I just know, oh, this is artwork they used for the movies, and I would kind of emulate that. But then also artists like Drew Struzan, who I became very well aware of at a young age. I remember going to movies and staring at these painted movie posters thinking they were photos, and it just tripped my mind out as a little kid to go like, how is that character's head so big and there's a character in front of him that's really small, and I'm like, that can't be photograph, or is it photo? But it looks so realistic, the painting, and his posters were so exciting too. So I remember at a young age just staring at Drew's posters and other movie poster artists too, like Richard Amsel and such. But
yeah.
Yeah, so those were some very early influences on me, along with the comic book artists who I was like reading, every day in my Batman and G.I. Joe comics and Spider-Man and X-Men and all that. So
yeah. Oh, totally resonate with that. As I mentioned, for me, just it's a personal choice. George Akimoto and René Magritte. George did a lot of work with like Silent Running, that
Okay.
type of movie poster, and
Yeah.
René Magritte was the Exorcist. One of the most iconic movie posters for me of
Oh
all
yeah.
time. Just so simple and
And I love like Thomas Peake's posters that he did for
Oh,
like the
yeah.
Star Trek films or even Superman. Like his poster work is so iconic. So like, I mean, I couldn't do that kind of artwork, but I remember as a little kid going, I want to paint like that someday, or I want to draw like that someday.
Yeah, all the genre movie stuff, like even the James Bond or the movie musicals, wherever, they had these just such great fully painted posters that, like Joe said, you could just stare at them for hours.
Yeah.
And even if that's not your style, you're like, I want to be able to have that kind of control and that kind of voice when I get older. And especially now that there's so little painted posters, when we get to see any of artwork of our friends that work in the industry, you just get excited because there's so much that's just photographs now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can remember exactly where you are. Tom Chantrell's movie posters, they would draw me in. I would want to see the movie based on just the poster. That's how incredible they were. So kind of moving on, we're going to share some of your work shortly on screen, but I want to get through one or two more questions. But so in terms of Star Wars movies or shows, whether it's Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, or whatever. So in terms of the movies and shows, what Star Wars movies or shows have inspired your art themes? Are you kind of more heavily influenced by like the Empire or the Rebellion, or kind of talk us a little bit about that?
I mean, I love all Star Wars, even if it's not so great or not so popular Star Wars, because I love that mythology and I love that saga. I love this, I love all the stories related with it. So I worked in the classic trilogy so much, especially because when I started with my Star Wars career, it was a few years before the prequels had come out and the special editions were just about to drop. And I had already started doing some Star Wars art for various role-playing game books, and all that was very classic trilogy oriented. But I mean, it seems like over the years, just because when I look at all the Star Wars artwork that I've done, or that Brian and I have done together, even, there's a lot of certain characters that tend to repeat. And it goes without a doubt that, I mean, classic trilogy is sort of the foundation of all Star Wars. So they tend to have some of the more popular or well-known characters like Darth Vader and Princess Leia and Boba Fett. And funny enough, those are the three characters that tend to kind of repeat a lot in my artwork, whether it's by assignment or for a certain project, or whether it's by personal choice. If I pitch an idea to Lucasfilm, like, hey, I have a great idea for a Boba Fett poster, and it's my 5th Boba Fett poster, so it just tends, I mean, I guess like I said, I love it all. I love the prequels. I even love the sequel trilogy bumps and all, but I guess maybe classic trilogy is what kind of, it's just because that's what I probably know. I don't know, not the most necessarily, but I have the most closest relationship with. But I love getting to do prequel art when I can, or I'm working on a sequel trilogy piece right now. But then I have another Boba Fett piece coming out soon, hopefully. So yeah, it's wherever wherever I can go.
Got it.
Yeah, I would say for me, like Joe was saying, the classic trilogy is the foundation of everything that I grew up with. But I like to kind of key in on a couple of things with my artwork, which is the struggle, right? The struggle with good and evil, the struggle between, the Empire and the Rebellion, or the First Order and the Resistance. So I'm always sort of looking for like those points of conflict, right? Those points where things are coming together, and how can I create something that highlights part of that conflict, whether it's like a propaganda illustration that's coming from, maybe it's coming from the Imperial side, or maybe it's coming from the Rebellion side, but that's putting you into that conflict somehow, letting you imagine yourself as being on one side or the other of that. And I think that kind of like dynamic positioning of putting yourself in the story or imagining what you would do if you were in the story makes the artwork, a little bit more personal. So that's kind of like the first focus of what I like to do. And then I think the second part is looking for ways to tell stories that happen between the movies or off screen type of things. So like the Boba Fett art that you have behind you there, we know that Boba Fett got, Han Solo and Carbonite and put him on a ship and took him away. And then in the next film, we understand where he went and what happened, but we don't see the in-between part. We don't see where Boba Fett, lands on Tatooine and goes to Jabba's palace and delivers Han Solo. So to create an illustration that sort of happens, between Empire and Jedi and kind of reveals part of that story, to me, that's really fun and exciting. And I think if I'm excited by it, that other fans and collectors are going to be just as excited, because like, oh, that's something that I kind of imagined how that could happen, but we didn't see it happen. And now I have this illustration that I can put in my home that, gets me excited because it's something I haven't seen before, but it's still Star Wars. So those are the two things that really draw me in when I'm creating something.
You're almost creating a single piece in these, let's just say, in the spirit of like Rogue One or Solo, right? It's, here's what may have happened. Here's where my imagination would have taken me if I had been there. That's great. So one last question before we show some of your artwork, which I'm really excited about. So let's talk a little bit about the process, okay? So for reference points, when you're creating artwork, do you use photographs, models, props for your artwork? Do you use any specific tools that you like to use to help create this magic that you both do?
Yeah, I think we're both pretty fond of reference when we can, whenever we can have access to it. My style has always, especially in later in my career, has gravitated towards realism, but that's also because I want to be very cinematic with my art. Like I want it to feel like something, like Brian said, like a scene from the movies, that maybe something we didn't see. And that's part of that comes from me in my comic book career too, as being a storyteller. I like to, I like doing pinups and cool looking posters, but I also, as an illustrator, I love to tell stories. So I tend to try to include storytelling in my art when I can. But and a lot with Star Wars being so detail oriented, using reference is for, at least for my style, is very key. So I like to work from photographs when I can, or I've had friends who've modeled for my artwork, and I put them, in the costumes as the characters. I've even made some of my friends into Star Wars like original characters too, so that's always kind of fun when that happens. But yeah, reference, and I have a pretty huge Star Wars library. Like I've like a bookshelves full, like many bookshelves full of Star Wars books. So part of the fun for me whenever I get a new project and I'm trying to figure out the composition or which characters, or I'm looking for a certain, a certain look of a character. I mean, everyone goes to Google, and you can go to Google and find lots of photos, but a lot of the time it's the same photos that people use all the time. So I really enjoy going into my Star Wars books and looking for images, and, even some older books that, maybe that are out of print, like, oh, there's a really cool picture of Han Solo that no one's ever really painted before. And maybe I can take that look of that character or that angle and, incorporate it into my composition. So that's part of the fun, is just flipping through all the books for hours and kind of reliving Star Wars through all my my books and stuff like that. And then, planning out my illustrations that way too. So yeah, it just depends on which project, and depends on, every process might be slightly different depending, but.
Well, and like Joe was saying, we're both visual storytellers. And so it may be a certain project where Lucasfilm gives us reference. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But, for me, I might go back and watch the same 5 minutes of one of the films a dozen times or so, just to get the scene in my head and the environment, and try to feel like what are the beats of the story right here, and what's the tension, and what do I want the person viewing the artwork to feel, and just try to get in the story. And then if it's got a ship or a character or something, I may have a toy or a photograph or something, but sometimes it's a model and a flashlight, and I'm rotating it around, just trying to like, what's the interesting angle here? How does this, become alive in a way that's different than what we've seen a bunch of times? And then that can open up new cans of worms, because I know one of them I wanted to show like a snow speeder kind of from, flying over the camera, and you're seeing the bottom side of the snow speeder. And then have to be a Lucasfilm, like, what does the exact bottom of a snow speeder look like? And then they have to go into their thing and go, well, we have to go look now, because who was the last person that wanted to draw the bottom underside of a snow speeder? So there's all these weird things that sometimes you get these crazy ideas in your head, and then you realize like, oh, it's fun to do things that not everyone does, but then how do you do it? How do you make it right? And you have to, go through sort of the chain to make sure that what you want to draw and what you want to paint, still fits within the Star Wars universe, which can make it a little bit of a challenge sometimes.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny. I was at an event recently, I think with John Morton, who played Dak, in Empire Strikes Back, and he was telling me a little bit about, we see Dak, the demise, but he kind of wanted, what would, if he had lived, what would happen to his character? What would, he was more interested in what if he had survived, where would he been involved in, the next battles in the story. But anyway, there's always that kind of, I guess, wonderment, if you like, about if the storyline had changed for him. So anyway, I know a lot of our members are really excited to share to see some of your work. So I'm going to share this on screen now. Maybe you can talk us through these a little bit about the work and why when you created them. Now, no favoritism; they are in alphabetical order. Okay, so I'm not showing somebody's work before somebody else's. So I'll share these on screen right away. Let me see if I can pull this up as a slideshow. Can you see that, guys?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, great. So I think, Brian, this is one of yours. This is one of yours also.
Yeah. So a couple of Star Wars Celebration pieces usually start out with pencil sketches on all of these, trying to create some like iconic moments from the films, and then, go in and start really working on it on my iPad. So like this Remember the Death Star piece, I really wanted to get into that like World War II mindset with this of, okay, at the end of Star Wars, the Death Star's been destroyed. How does the Empire react? Like, what is it that they do? Like, what would be not just a propaganda poster, but something that really fits in the Star Wars universe? And so the same way that in America, we sort of had like these like, remember Pearl Harbor, or, that sort of thing. I was like, oh, let's do like a Remember the Death Star and like rally the troops for the Empire and like get them all excited. So like just trying to make it feel in universe and believable is kind of part of the challenge for some of these. And like with the Empire Strikes Back, when they're, again, we saw Boba Fett, loading Han onto the ship, but we didn't actually see him fly away. We didn't see him being escorted by the cloud cars and, jetting off towards the next movie. And so just little things like that, where you can, get glimpse at those moments that maybe happened off screen, are just a lot of fun to get to illustrate that type of thing.
Got it. Okay, let's take a look at Joe's. So let me get to the right place. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
So this is one I actually believe that you created for Star Wars Celebration 2017, and I actually remember seeing this prior to this. I think prior to the show or at the show, the Rogue One Jyn piece.
Yeah, that was a piece I did for Star Wars Celebration. You're correct. That was for 2017 in Orlando. So, or was it 2016 Orlando? Was it 2017? Yeah, it might have been 2017. Yeah. So
it's all a blur.
Yeah, I know. They start to sometimes, when they're only like 2 years apart. I'm like, it totally. Yeah, you look back, it's like I've done so many events. That was a fun one to do, and that was just me trying to capture some of the excitement and the dynamic action of Rogue One for the fans. I knew it wasn't like a literal representation of the scene, but I wanted to kind of put my spin on it and include the three main heroes and kind of do some like some really cool it kind of a pinup, but also again like storytelling with action. So taking a lot of my comic book sensibilities and then applying it to more of a cinematic feel to the Star Wars films.
Yeah, but when I first saw this piece, I honestly thought that it was just a freeze frame of the movie. It's that lifelike. I had to really look at it and go, "Wow, that's an incredible piece of artwork." You know, it really just looks
Thanks.
true to life.
Yeah, there's all
Unbelievable.
kinds of reference in there from like I use some hot toys that for some of the posing, some of like especially for Jyn Erso for like her arm and the baton, I think maybe even parts of the jacket and the legs, and there's all kinds of different sources I Frankenstein from to create this image. You know, I had a friend of mine who posed in the dead stormtrooper poses is someone from the 501st. So yeah, I was just taking all these ideas and like assembling this kind of really cool scene.
And then latterly, then this is obviously a Mandalorian.
Yeah, that was something I did just for myself as because a Mandalorian was coming out, was brand new, and I wanted to. I think I did this art right after the first season because I was so busy with other projects and I wanted to do something for Mandalorian. So by the time I got to this piece, I think this first season had just ended, but I wanted to include, just some of my favorite characters. I love the show so much, and it was a labor of love to do that piece. So
again, looking at Grogu, but Baby Yoda's right at the the bottom of the piece again, very lifelike. It's jumped out to me when I saw that. And then obviously for me, Book of Boba Fett, again, just what I love about this is just the kind of the different style from the other two pieces, but the colors really made a lot of impact on me when I first saw this.
Yeah, that was so I did that for Lucasfilm as a promotional artwork leading up to the premiere of the show, and that I wanted to really push the warms and cools and the old west feel with the warm tones and the umbers and the siennas, because we knew, like Mandalorian, Boba Fett was going to be very gritty and Western influenced, and so I that was kind of what I was channeling, was like the old West vibe for Book of Boba Fett, and he's my favorite character in next to Darth Vader in Star Wars. So getting to do this piece was, as a fan, was a real treat to do.
Yeah. And finally, then we've got this piece with Ahsoka and Vader. So
yeah, that was fun. So I'm a big fan of Star Wars Rebels, and Ahsoka is one of my also favorite characters, right up there with Vader and Boba Fett. So
can I say that that artwork was awesome signed, but I'm not being biased or anything of that nature.
The disembodied voice of Spencer. Yeah, Spencer got that signed by Ashley Eckstein and Matt Lanter, so which was pretty cool. Who Matt did the voice for Anakin in Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. So and so he did the voice of Vader in that episode. This was my tribute to World Between Worlds, which I love those episodes of Star Wars Rebels. So getting to do Ahsoka, and this was just before she was revealed on Mandalorian. Everyone knew that Rosario was cast, but it wasn't official. It wasn't announced yet. So, and my style is very realistic and cinematic. It's like, well, if I can't paint Rosario because Lucasfilm didn't want me to, with this poster coming out prior to her appearance in Mandalorian, I called on my friend Ray Kennix, who's a costumer, and she does a really great Ahsoka cosplay. And I worked with her and a photographer friend of ours, Mark Edwards, and we art directed the shoot, and that was Ray as Ahsoka. So it made it a really special piece because she's a friend of mine and we're all friends. So
yeah. Well, I've seen both of you. Your work is incredible. It is unique. I really enjoy the different styles. And for me, I had a really, really hard time picking just a few just to show tonight or to showcase, because I love all of them.
We sent you a bunch. We overwhelmed you, sir.
That's okay. So moving on, before we start talking about Celebration, that's coming up within just a short 2 months. So I think a lot of our members would love to hear, what was your kind of first licensed work through either Disney or Lucasfilm? What was that production and review process like?
I'll let Brian go. I mean,
Sure.
and he's
I think I got lucky with my first one, which was the one of the propaganda posters with around Empire Strikes Back. I remember I created the illustration and I turned it in, and the feedback I got was basically like, "Oh, this is cool, but we're not really sure if people will go for this or not. It's a little different." And I'm like, "Well, did you want me to change something?" They're like, "No, it just was like this general, like, we don't know, is this Star Wars kind of thing?" And so I forget what the sales window was. It was this art event, and I remember if it was like a 2-week sales window, what it was supposed to be when they opened, limited edition, they opened it up. And I think on like day 2 or 3, I got the call and they're like, "Yeah, your piece is completely sold out." And I was like, "Oh," and they're like, "So clearly there's people are interested in this idea of propaganda and your style and whatever." And so it just kind of went to like, "Well, what else you got, kid?" So that was kind of my first experience. But they're not all that smooth, but it was a very good first experience to have for sure.
And that's just Brian's first experience on his own. I mean, technically, when we go
We've
back
done
to
so much together.
We've done so much together since 2005 for Star Wars. Starting with Star Wars Insider together, and then lots of other Star Wars related projects within that and after that as well. So,
well, and I was so lucky because Joe was the he was filtering all that feedback out on those, so I didn't have to deal one-on-one with anything. He was like, "Oh, we have to change this, we have to change that." I was like, "Okay, whatever." What about you, Joe? What was like your first big
my first big break with Star Wars officially was around 1996 for the Star Wars role-playing game. I had just come out of art college at that point, and I had already collected, as in high school and also in college, I was a fan of the Star Wars role-playing game. And I remember flipping through those books and modules and going, "Well, this artwork's not that great, but like I could probably do something as good at least, or maybe even a little better." So, because of course I was cocky, that I was just out of art college. So I submitted my portfolio, and I ended up getting a call back from the publisher, and they were like, "Yeah, I'd done some Star Wars samples, my own characters and some other Star Wars characters, and they liked my samples, so they ended up hiring me to do some freelance for this in the Star Wars role-playing game. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but Star Wars, basically. It was if anyone doesn't know what that refers to, but it was cool because I got to illustrate for a few years tons of books and magazines, artwork for Star Wars Insider, Star Wars Gamer magazine, and that was kind of my early career, was from like 96, right before the special editions had come out. Once those movies came out in 97 and I was already well into Star Wars projects, my career ended up actually about a year or so later, once I got my website and I put all that artwork that I had done for the role-playing game and also for some of these magazines, once I put that online, that's really when my career took off. So probably around 99, 2000, because I was one of the probably earliest artists to actually have like a portfolio of Star Wars art on the internet. So, and I remember getting emails all the time, like, "Where's this art from? What's this art for?" And no one had seen it in all the books from years earlier. So that kind of was responsible. And after the role-playing game and Star Wars Gamer and then Star Wars Insider, then getting to do stuff for other licensors, and then Lucasfilm directly for different projects. So just kind of took off from there.
So do you have any idea if your work has been personally picked up by somebody like Lucas and, looked at and went, "Wow, this is great. We should use more of this"? Or,
well, I mean, I don't know if
I'm just fanboying right now.
Well, he has bought some of my artwork in the past. Yeah. So I'm lucky and very, very honored that he, saw some of my artwork and was like, "Yeah, I want to buy that, and I'll buy that and buy that piece." So that's really a huge thrill to know that some of my earlier Star Wars art especially is, you know, in the archives. But and it's owned by him. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know that Lucasfilm likes working with me, and I love working with them and getting to put my spin on these legendary characters.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I got a next question. I'm Brian. I got a question for you. So when you watch, you know, a Star Wars movie, you know, one of the let's just say it's one of the sequels, or if you watch Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian, when you watch them, do you watch them through the lens of an artist, or do you just kind of watch them and enjoy them? You know, does your mind suddenly kick into, I'd like to create that, I'd like to put that piece together?
I think when I watch them just as a fan. I'm along for the ride and the exploration and the discovery of the characters and the story and you know, all that. Usually what will happen is it's, you know, 2 a.m. in the morning and my eyes pop open, and that's when I've had some like epiphany or idea or concept, and I like rustle around and get up, and my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like looking for my iPad or my sketchbook, and I'm like, you know, got some little light on, drawing at 2 a.m. just some like the worst, crappiest little sketch, just so I don't forget that idea. And then the next day I'll get up and I'll kind of like, what is this? And I'm like, oh yeah, right. And then I'll go and really try to put the idea down. So it's not when I'm watching it, it's more like I'm just taking it all in, I'm absorbing it. And then somewhere there's that little spark where you get the idea of like, oh, I'm going to take this, and somehow they're going to work together. And that's kind of when the magic part comes together.
Got it. Okay, next question. So it's something I'm personally very interested in. So, you know, if let's say Disney or Lucasfilm or whatever approach you and they want you to create some artwork, you know, how much insight do you get into content before you create that? Do they give you very limited information, or do they just say, you know, use your imagination? You know, I mean, I'm sure you guys might have some insight into what you're creating, right? And then probably have a tough time trying to keep that information.
It's a wide chasm, a very wide chasm.
It used to be pre-Disney, early days of the internet. Like when I was working on projects for the prequels, for example, it was much more like, here's everything, you know, like, okay, here's the project we want you to do. Oh, you need more reference? Don't worry. You know, here's a partial script to the movie, you know. Nowadays, not so much. So it's and understandably so, it is kind of harder to work that way because we're not as privy to, unless you're directly involved with the production, licensing artists in general tend to get very little information. They'll give us some stuff. They'll point us in the right direction. Say if like, no, that's, you know, but usually like when I'm getting an assignment, it's like, well, we have to wait for the trailer to come out before we can really show you anything, or, you know, so it can be secretive a lot more. It's kind of like pulling teeth a little bit to get them to give you the necessary reference. There's a lot of NDAs, of course. And then, but it's also because with the internet being what it is, and things tend to leak, and, you know, the wrong thing gets out and it spoils the surprise for everyone. And so Lucasfilm was very protective of the storytelling, and they like to keep surprises as close to the best as possible. So it does make our work a little bit harder these days, but, you know, we tend to manage with what they give us.
Yeah, I think in the earlier days, it'd be like these companies are trying to create a bunch of product to have ready when the movie or the show comes out. And now things have sort of flipped where they're like, we're gonna let the season unfold, and then everyone can wait a year for their Baby Yoda merchandise because we don't want to spoil it or whatever.
Right.
So it's almost like, as artists, we used to get all these secrets up front, and now it's more like, well, we'll give you a little bit, but we're probably going to be doing the majority of the work after the fact.
Yeah, it's also because there's so much more content now. So like Brian said, a lot of this Star Wars storytelling, especially now, is coming out weekly, and they're producing this you know, these Star Wars shows as fast as possible. So it's just, yeah, oftentimes our stuff is coming out like after. I mean, it's kind of like why with Hasbro, you might see the toys for the show or the action figures of the new characters like a year later, because they're also not always privy to all the new stuff in the new movies and shows. So sometimes the toys and the licensing stuff will come out after, it's not like the old days when it would come out before or right at the same time necessarily. You might get it a little later, but it's also because this stuff's always in motion and they're trying to keep things as secret as possible.
Got it. So on to a very exciting announcement. For those of the members that didn't know, Joe and Brian, congratulations to them both. They have been selected. I don't know what the selection process is like. I have no idea, but I know they have been selected.
Neither do we.
to showcase some exclusive artwork specifically designed for Star Wars Celebration 2022 Anaheim. And so I know that you can't tell us lots about, or even give us an indication of what you created for Celebration, but can you give us some hints or some kind of ideas of the themes of your exclusive artwork for the Stealth Celebration in 2 months' time?
Yeah, Brian, why don't you go? So
sure. So I'll start out by saying that, yeah, we, obviously Lucasfilm and Star Wars, they're going to announce the whole group of artists that have been selected. So it's not just the two of us, but that news will probably be forthcoming soon. So everyone, stay tuned for your favorite artist, because hopefully they'll be announced soon as well. But for me, let's see, how do I want to tease my artwork? I will say a few, let's see, I can say some things that it's not. It doesn't take place on Tatooine, but it does take place in a galaxy far, far away. And you might want to, well, it's definitely someplace you would want to go when you see it.
It's very timely. I think that's a good way to put it. Like in terms of what's happening with Star Wars currently. Yeah. And Brian didn't plan it that way. You did this piece, you did the sketch for the piece like a few years ago, right?
Yeah, several years ago. I can't say when because that would give it away, but yeah, so I've had that in my sketchbook for several years. And so I can say this. I can say that so when I turn my things into Lucasfilm, they're like, oh, this is really cool. Do you have any other ideas? And I was like, well, I have this one thing in my sketchbook. And they're like, okay, well, show us. And I showed them, and like, yes, that's the thing we want you to have at Celebration. So then I had to, make my illustration from that. So I was very excited about it. And I'll just say that, if you had a chance to take your significant other on the best night out in a galaxy far, far away, then this might be what you would imagine.
It's a pretty cool piece conceptually. Yeah, it's imagine it in Brian's style too, and what he's known for, and it might give you a little bit more of a hint of where this is headed. But I wish we could show it because it's so cool. It's such a cool idea.
It'll be really exciting on the day when StarWars.com, when they decide to show all the artist work, everyone can flock there and check it out. Then, do we think that's gonna be like May 1st or somewhere around
May 1st or 2nd? I think StarWars.com is going to drop the art show announcements, and they'll have all the artists who are going to be at Celebration, and then they'll reveal maybe all at once, or maybe over the course of a few days, but they'll reveal all the exclusive lithographs that all the artists who've been selected have produced for the event. And there's going to be some really amazing artworks for sure.
So I don't know if you know yet, but obviously, what I, as I said, I love all of your work, and I'm sure I'm going to love, what you created for this celebration. But do you know what the process might be for? I mean, I want everybody to come and visit you, and we'll talk a little bit about where you'll be in Celebrations, so people can find you in a short while. But is there a pre-order process for this exclusive art, for Celebration? Do you know a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I'll drop one tease before we get into that for my artwork. I'll just say, if you're interested in my artwork, and if you're a fan of Solo and you want Solo 2 to happen, I would suggest, help my artwork sell out, and that would send a good sign to Lucasfilm that, hey, maybe we should do a solo too. So that's my big hint for my piece.
That's a good tease.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, the pre-order process, it's I don't know, Brian, do you want to start it out? Because it's a little different this year.
So yeah, they're exclusive to Star Wars Celebration. They're only going to be available to people who are attending Star Wars Celebration. So that's the first thing. You have to be attending. There will be pre-order through Acme Archives. And that'll be for all the artists that have been selected for the art show. And what Joe and I are recommending, whether it's our art or one of the other artists, take advantage of the pre-orders, because some of this stuff is going to sell out. We have not had a Star Wars Celebration in person in several years now. The demand is going to outstrip the supply. Also, if you want to support these artists, do the pre-orders, because like Joe was saying, that sends the signal, right, that people are interested in this artwork, they're interested in this artist, they support the characters, the composition, whatever it is. That's the best way that as a collector, as a fan, that you can support those artists, is by doing the pre-orders. Also, it benefits the person who's attending, right? Because when you get there, you're not gonna have to wait in 5 different lines and all that kind of stuff, and get there and go, oh, it's sold out. Now what am I gonna get? You'll already have everything's already purchased. You'll just be able to show up and do the redemption process, get the artwork. We're happy to talk to you and autograph it and do all that stuff. So it's kind of a win-win. And I can tell you, as one of the artists, the pre-orders matter so much. And, so we're just urging all the fans to take advantage of that this year.
And we should point out that in the past, from all previous celebrations, fans would be able to come right to us directly at our booths or at our table in the art show and buy the artwork directly from us. Well, that's a thing in the past now. So if we not only recommend the pre-order through Acme Archives or darkink.com or Dark Ink Art, which is sort of the affiliate site to Acme for their timed releases. So when they drop that link for the pre-order through Acme or Dark Ink, if you don't pre-order the art beforehand, you can buy it at the events if the pre-orders aren't sold out, but you can only buy it from the Acme Art Show area. So you won't be able to buy it from, say, Brian's table directly necessarily, or actually in the art show, you can go and get a receipt to pick it up at the Acme register. But for example, for my artwork, since my booth will be outside the art show, I'll be pointing everyone directly to the Acme booth in order to buy the artwork there. So you won't be able to get it directly from us, but Acme will have our artwork in the art show, should you choose to buy it at the event, if it's not sold out. So
right.
There's only going to be 250 edition for our artwork. So I know last celebration, I think all the pre-orders had sold out. So or most of them had. So if you're an art fan, or if you're a fan of my artwork or Brian's art, or any of the other artists, we recommend the pre-orders it's a 2-week window from May 1st to May 14th, I think. And if you miss a pre-order, if you're going to be at Celebration, then you have to buy the artwork at the Acme booth.
Yeah, and you're probably going to want to do that the first day, because I think it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy to think you can roll in on Sunday. It's all going to be gone.
And that goes for any exclusive. You want to get it the first day, because by Sunday, most of the exclusives at Celebration tend to be depleted. So
yeah, that's a great tip, Guy. Thank you very much. And I know we put that under the heading of hidden gems. If you are attending Celebration and you want to order artwork, it's specifically Joe's, Brian's, or anybody else, you have to, my advice would be to select the pre-order option. I know I did for Chicago 2019, and by the time I got to the show, I'm so glad I did it, because they were sold out first day. So make sure you do that if you're interested in. So apart from the exclusives that you'll have at Celebration, if our members want to see a little bit more about your work, where can they go to? Do you have websites that you'd like them to visit so they can check out your previous work?
I'm pretty easy to find. It's just joecorroney.com or at Joe Corroney on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, and I have my artwork on Facebook, which I tend to update regularly. And I'm doing a lot of conventions coming up. I'll be in Lexington Comic-Con this coming weekend in Lexington, Kentucky, and then there's Philadelphia and Indianapolis and Cleveland. and these are all events before Celebration. So I'm good. I've got a pretty busy schedule leading right into Celebration. I think then there's Motor City Comic Con like the weekend before Celebration, so I have that one as well. So I'm, if you don't catch me online, I'll be in your city at some point. What about you, Brian?
Well, I was thinking not only is Joe going to be in your city, but if you got a couch or a spare bedroom,
Let me know.
Got to save on those hotel funds, man.
Exactly.
So I'm Octopolis everywhere. So Facebook, all social media. It's Octopus and Metropolis put together. That's where that crazy name comes from. It's OKTOPOLIS. So that's where I am everywhere, Octopolis. And unlike Joe, I'm not doing any other cons except for Celebration because I'm still into this pandemic thing where I haven't done any shows. So Celebration is going to be like my first show since all this craziness started. So if you haven't seen my face in a long time, come on out to Celebration and come over and say hi, because I probably miss seeing you guys as well.
That's great. And so can you give us an idea roughly if people want to come and say hi in person and, just look at some of your art in person? Can you let us know exactly or roughly where you are on the show floor?
My booth right now, I believe it's number 2611, and it should be catty corner to the Hasbro booth. So I'll have a booth towards the main entrance of the Celebration, the main exhibit hall. So right when you first walk in the side doors, you'll see one of the first booths you'll end up seeing right up front is going to be the Hasbro booth, I believe, and it's pretty big. They have a pretty big footprint on the floor plan. And I'm kind of in the I'm to their left in that first aisle right there on the corner. So I'm right next to the Hasbro booth, 2611. You should be able pretty easy to find me.
And Brian?
And I'm so sad because Joe and I usually share a spot and it just didn't work out for me this time, but I will be in the art show area. So Acme will have their giant booth like they always do with their pillars and the artwork and everything. And then there'll be tables of a bunch of us artists back there. So come in that giant group. I'll be there. Happy to chat with everybody and see my Star Wars family and sign artwork and, just catch up with everybody because it's been way too long.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite things for Celebration. Yeah. I mean, we love to go as, to, hook up fans with our artwork and, but for us, it's to see our Star Wars family, because this is like, it's our family and pretty much
really
a lot of our friends. And so to get to celebrate the thing that we love the most with all of our family and friends in the same place at the same event, that's what makes Star Wars Celebration like the most special thing whenever it rolls around. Yeah. So we're definitely anxious to go.
Yeah, we all feel the same way. It's been way too long. And I first bumped into you guys in Orlando, and I think I actually bumped into Brian. Was it at the Festival of Arts in Epcot one time?
Yes.
I think I bumped in. Saw your work there as well. So yes, you're right. It's long overdue, and I think we've all waited patiently for it to come around. So I have one or two wrap-up questions before we take, if you have time for questions from our members.
Of course.
So this is a question that I'm starting tonight. I hope to carry on with other speakers that we have in our speaker series. And this is a question that I'm posing for my two wonderful friends, Kevin Thompson, who played an Ewok in Return of the Jedi, and Tim Donaldson, who played a Jawa in the original Star Wars movie. So I'd love to know, Jawas versus Ewoks. If there was a fight, who would win, Jawas or Ewoks? I'd love to hear your opinion.
Well, before The Mandalorian, I'd have been like Ewoks all the way. But then in Mando, we saw some really hardcore Jawa action. So I think I'm going to have to backpedal, and I'm going to have to go Team Jawa.
Oh, yeah, that's 1-0 to Tim Donaldson.
Yeah, surprisingly, the Jawas are getting a lot of screen time in the new live action series. So, and we are seeing some little more savage side to them, especially when there's a mudhorn egg involved.
Oh, yeah.
Get them all Suga-fied. So if they're fighting over an Asuga egg, a mudhorn egg, then I'd give it to the Jawas. But I don't know, like the Ewoks are pretty resourceful, and they've taken down ATSTs. They've they fly, they swing. I got to give it to Ewoks.
You heard it. We're starting the internet feud here.
Yeah,
I'm going to be
sorry,
team
it's
Jawa.
Ewoks.
He's team Ewok. This is it. It's Fury now, Joe. Forever.
We've been discussing this with both of the characters that play these, and it's kind of been back and forth. So it's great to get your opinion. So
Can we do Twilight next?
One for the Jawas, one for the Ewoks. There you go. That's wonderful.
Team Edward. I love Batman. Sorry,
and I'm sure this will continue for several weeks after tonight. I can tell you.
Yeah, so, Ewoks. I love Ewoks.
So if you guys have a little bit of extra time, we will jump into some of the member questions. So the first one, I'm going to have to scroll through the chat, but I've got one noted down real quick.
Sure.
So the first one is, it might be a tough one actually. If you could create artwork for one other franchise, if you had your dreams, you could create artwork for one other franchise that you haven't worked for. Who and what would it be?
I'll let Brian go.
Ooh, that's tough. Because I've got to work on a lot of cool stuff. So I'm gonna say, I don't know if it counts as a franchise or not, but I would be down to do just about anything Haunted Mansion related. Like you could even maybe roll Nightmare Before Christmas into that, but we'll just say Haunted Mansion.
Got it.
And I kind of already said my answer because I'm a big Batman fan, right? I mean, that was sort of, along with Star Wars, was my entryway into comic books as a kid. And I grew up loving Batman and anything related to Batman. So I'm a pretty big Batman fan. And I haven't really, I've done stuff for DC, and I've drawn some of the characters here and there, but to do something for Batman, whether it's comic books or movie related, that would be the franchise where I'd really love to leave my mark on.
Didn't we do a Batman, like a convention program cover guide? What was that?
Yeah, we did for Phoenix that was back in like 2014 or something, I think. It was for the 70.
Get on eBay and get that Joe Corroney sweet Batman exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, it was a convention artwork for the program book, but it was for the 75th anniversary of Batman. So for me to do that piece, even if it was just for the Phoenix Comic Con, was still a pretty special piece. And to have Brian color it was awesome too. So
tag team.
Yeah,
that's great. You definitely are great collaborators. So
thank you.
Next question from Jeff. Jeff Carefree is one of our admins. Hi, Jeff. Hope you're having a good evening. Jeff's question is: Did you have to adjust anything on your artwork for Celebration when it was postponed from 2020 to 2022?
Well, for me, I did two different illustrations. So when we did the virtual Celebration, I had that Legend of Lando artwork. And so this for 2022, it's all new. So I didn't have to do any like changes or modifications because it's just like entirely fresh piece just for this year. But that's a great question.
Yeah. Funny thing is, like the piece I did for this Celebration was also, it was a fresh piece in the sense that it wasn't something for the previous Celebration. However, it was a piece I had already developed for Disney a little earlier, around the same time, but because of the way things worked out at the time with licensing, even though the artwork was greenlit, they decided to put it on hold and maybe use it for something else later, which was I was in talks with. But then once I found out that there may not be an opportunity for this artwork to come out the way it was intended, I thought, oh, well, I'll submit it as my Celebration artwork. So I ended up getting it published that way, which was great because I didn't want the artwork not to be seen, and I was hoping to find an avenue for it to come out. So yeah, sometimes that happens where we might develop something and it might get put on hold, or Lucasfilm changes their mind on something, or who knows what happens. It's just the way the industry works. And then sometimes your artwork may or may not come out in a different format or a different venue or something. And I've had that happen so many times over the years with different things where done something, you get paid for it, but then it doesn't come out, or you do it for one thing and it comes out at a different date than you thought. And so,
Yeah, for collectors who don't know, I mean, sometimes we're sitting on, 10, 20, 30 illustrations that
Yeah.
we know will never see the light of the day. And we would just so want to share them with everybody just because, you're proud of what you did, or you thought it was a good idea. And you're like, it'll never see the light of day.
or it will, we just don't know when sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
we'll
That's
have
true.
some things that we forgot we did, and oh, hey, this is going to come out now. It's like, oh, okay, that's awesome.
You keep it in your locker.
Yeah.
So question from Dan. Dan, hope you're doing okay. Question for you, Brian, from Dan. What lightsabers do you have in your backdrop?
Oh, you know what? I did a whole YouTube video on those, and now I'm going to blank on which brand it is because it's been so long. But yeah, go to Octopolis on YouTube, and I actually show like which sabers they are, which saber holders they are, how I'm hanging the artwork, the whole thing. It's like a 5-minute video. It's not very long at all.
Yeah.
But I even have like the links to like Amazon and wherever I got everything from. So yeah, definitely check that out. But it was so much fun to build this display.
He's got a really good YouTube channel for Octopolis. So definitely check out Brian's YouTube, because he does lots of great sketches and Star Wars characters and Disney characters. A lot of tiki themed artwork. So he's got some great videos. If you want to watch someone actually create art from scratch to finish and to see how he sketches it and stuff, it's great.
Fantastic. Next question is from Mark. Mark is one of our admins. It's a question for you, Joe. He's asking, did you do the books for the role-playing game before or after it became a D20 game?
So I did the books before. So West End Games had the license, and from like 1987 to like till they went bankrupt in 1998. So their system was a D6 system for the Star Wars role-playing game. Then once West End Games lost the license, I worked for them for about 2 years, and I did like 13 or 14 Star Wars books for them. Then Wizards of the Coast got the role-playing game license, and it was right after episode 1 had come out. So this would have been early 2000 or so, and I think when their first product came out. And that was the D20 system. And that was Wizards of the Coast Star Wars role-playing game. And then I ended up doing some artwork for them for a few different books for Wizards too. So I started in the D6 and then ended up in the D20 and worked on the game for those different publishers.
Got it. So next question is from our member Sean. This is, I guess, to both of you, or if one of you wants to take it. Do you have a favorite character, scene, or ship you enjoy drawing the most?
Oh, mine's Boba Fett. Yours, Brian?
Yeah, well, since you chose a character, I'll do a ship, and boy, it's a tough one between. But I'll say AT-AT or AT-AT is probably the one I'm most known for.
Yeah, his like you can see one of the pieces back there, the Rebellion piece, and you've got don't you have another one where the foot's coming down on the?
Yeah, that was like one of the very first ones with the
that one's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, whenever he draws the AT-ATs, they're really dynamic, and I love the stylized coloring and line art he does for those.
Yeah. Do you know what, Brian? It's the same for me. You know, when I first saw New Hope as we know it now, the Millennium Falcon blew me away. But when I saw Empire Strikes Back, it was the AT-ATs. I couldn't believe these things. They just blew my mind when I saw them. I remember talking about them for weeks on end.
Yeah.
Next question is from our member Lila. Hi, Lila. Hope you're having a good evening. She asks, well, again, to either of you, if one of you wants to take this, what was your first break into making art into a business? Was it by discovery, or did you have to submit?
Mine was just really, I knew I wanted to be a freelance illustrator, but I couldn't just necessarily jump into that full force. It took me a few years of developing clients. So right out of art college, like I mentioned earlier, I started illustrating for the Star Wars books for the role-playing game. And then for the next few years, different Star Wars publications like Star Wars Gamer magazine and then Star Wars Insider. During that time, I was also working as a freelance artist in independent comics as well. At that same time, in between balancing all this freelance, I did have a full-time job. So for those first few years out of college, I was working in an art department for a publisher, a school book publisher, and doing illustrations from 9 to 5 for them, and then at night working on my freelance for all these different projects. So, but it took me a few years of doing that, where around 1990s, 98, I would say, when I jumped in full force with the freelance. And it was scary. It wasn't like something I could necessarily say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it and I'm going to be successful. It's like, it was very ups and downs and rocky, and there's no science to it necessarily. There's no formula, but if you work hard and you keep at it, and you're professional and you meet your deadlines, and if you're great with clients over email and on the phone and in person, and then eventually you build up a career. And I would say it took me a few years early on, but I took the big jump and the dive into it to just all or nothing.
I think Joe and we got our big break around the same time. I got to go to my first San Diego Comic-Con in '98. And I handed my portfolio out to anybody that would take it. And about 6 months later, I got a phone call in like the middle of the afternoon. And it's like, hey, is this Brian Miller? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, I'm looking at your portfolio. This stuff looks really cool. I need some help out with some Wolverine pages. And I was like, well, who is this? Like, this is Rob Liefeld. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so Rob was doing I think it was like Wolverine 50, and it was like it was Cable 50, and it's Wolverine versus Cable. That's what it was. And so he this is old dial-up internet days. And so he sends me over like 5 pages of inked Wolverine versus Cable. And I stay up all night doing them, send them back to him at like 2 a.m. And I just remember waking up the next day to the phone ringing. And I pick it up, and they're like, is this Brian Miller? I'm like, yes. And this is Mark Powers at Marvel Comics. And I'm just thinking, oh, fudge, what did I screw up? And they're like, did you color these 5 pages? And they named the pages off. I was like, yeah. And they're like, we love them. And within 30 days, I was working on, X-Men and Wolverine and Cable and Avengers, just everything Marvel. And so I went from it looks like an overnight success, but like Joe said, there's just all these years of struggle leading up to it. But then once you get that moment, once you get that opportunity, it's what you can do with it. And lucky it all worked out for me.
That's wonderful. So before we go on to the last question, the final question, I promise, we have a couple of messages. Mary Carr dropped by to say hi to both of you.
Hey,
Mary says hi.
Hey, Mary.
And the Vandalorian has posted the message today. He loves and has Brian's Boba Hot Wheels.
Yay.
Yes. It's pretty. Tell him quickly about your Hot Wheels have your art.
So yeah, very, very lucky. Jimmy at Mattel loved my artwork and approached me about using it for some Hot Wheels packaging. And then unbeknownst to me, not only is it on the packaging, they actually put it on the 5 vehicles themselves. So if you had, I think they're sold out, but you could probably find them somewhere, but it's got the artwork on the vehicle and then on the packaging. It was such a pleasure. And they tell me it was the fastest selling Star Wars Hot Wheels series of all time. So that's always a good thing to hear.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. So last question, and I think this is a good question to kind of finish on. So off the subject of art altogether into kind of Star Wars fandom, if you like. So as we approach the release of more Star Wars content, we know we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi coming up very, very soon. What are you looking forward to seeing most, whether it's in terms of content from Disney, in the Star Wars theme, and what are your hopes for the future of the franchise? What would you like to see more of? Would you like to see more standalone movies, more kind of the series content through Disney Plus? What are your hopes as fans and wishes for the future in terms of content? I think is to summarize the question.
I'm definitely hyped for Obi-Wan. That's a legacy character from one of the the best actors from the prequels. Obi-Wan is legendary in Star Wars mythology. So to see this story that we're about to see soon, with those dark times years when the Empire's ruling and all the Jedi are wiped out. I mean, this is going to be pretty exciting. It's kind of like going back to like what the prequels were, when we got to see the beginnings of, the Clone Wars, and which were only alluded to in the classic trilogy, and that relationship of Anakin and Obi-Wan. So this is, again, one of those time periods that's kind of, it's been off limits in storytelling, especially live action storytelling, for a reason. And now we're getting our first sort of real glimpse into that period. So yeah, I'm excited for Obi-Wan Kenobi for sure. And Bad Batch. I love Star Wars animation, and everything that Dave Filoni and Lucasfilm Animation has done has been just, I mean, I even loved Resistance as well. So I loved everything that they've done. I've loved Bad Batch so much, so I can't wait for Bad Batch season 2.
Yes.
And personally, I'd like to see Star Wars, even though streaming is where it's at right now, especially with Star Wars specifically, which is great. But I still want those movie theater experiences to continue. So I can't wait to see. Maybe it'll be Taika's film. Maybe it'll be, I think the next one will probably be the Rogue Squadron film that we see on the big screen in a few years. So hopefully sooner. But yeah, I'm definitely anxious to get back in the movie theater for that. I mean, streaming's great, but nothing really compares to the big screen and opening weekend and being there with, hundreds of people who are all into the same thing and everyone's cheering and clapping. I mean, that kind of communal storytelling experience.
Yeah.
I mean, streaming's great. You can do that at home, but to I think that's where you really can you can reach some really epic plateaus with Star Wars.
You certainly can't replace or replicate the IMAX experience for me. If there's a movie I really want to see, it'll typically be in IMAX. How about you, Brian?
Exactly.
So I'll just add a little bit to what Joe said, because I'm 100% on board with everything he said, and say that, like, Mandalorian proved that we can tell a story that is new characters, new experiences with maybe just a slight connection to the existing framework. And, I'm excited to see more of that. I mean, I love the classic trilogy and the prequels and the sequels and all the characters that we know and love, but there's some excitement when they can do something new like Mandalorian, and it feels like Star Wars, and it is Star Wars, but it's also something we haven't seen before. And so if they can have another hit like that on top of everything else, then I'm really excited to see what that is.
That's great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, guys, for spending so much time with us this evening. It's been a very rare treat to get to know you a little bit better, to introduce you to our members, and to share the wonderful work that you both do, and just to get to know you guys a bit better and learn about your background and how you got into the business and what you love about Star Wars and the franchise. And and I'm sure that having met you this evening, our members will be flocking to your booth to say hi to you in person, and to look at your work, and to see to meet you as I say from the first introduction this evening. So thank you so much, guys, from everybody at the Virtual Cantina Network.
Oh, thanks for having us. I mean, this has been a treat for us. We've been excited to come on and talk about Star Wars Celebration and share our love of Star Wars and our hype for the event in May. So we're excited to see everyone there. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And please, anybody who comes to say hi at Celebration, let us know that you saw us here so that we can put those names and faces together.
Oh yeah, and if we're at our booths and we're busy and we have a crowd of people, don't run off. Just we try to take time to talk with everyone. So yeah, so don't worry. Like, sometimes we get a little busy or overwhelmed because Celebration's so busy, especially when we're at our booths. So just definitely wave at us or wait in line, and we'll talk with you for sure.
Yeah, hang out for a few minutes for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of members will drop by and say hi and at least introduce themselves to you. Anyway, with that being said, I just want to wrap up this evening's events by just mentioning, again, if you're interested in Joe and Brian's work, check out their websites. Come and see them in person. If you're interested in some of their exclusives for Celebration, please pre-order so that you don't miss out. We don't want anybody to be disappointed. I know that I will be for sure. So I'll be there waiting for the announcement of when your exclusives hit the pre-order date. So with that being said, if you've enjoyed this evening's discussion with Joe and Brian, don't forget to check us out, the Virtual Cantina Network. We have a YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe to that if you have the time. And the same with Facebook. We have content available through the Virtual Cantina Network on our Facebook site. We're on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, all the social media platforms you can think of. We have representation there. Please check them out there. And mustn't forget that this Thursday we have the part 5 of the Path of the Darksaber watch along with Jeff, Spencer, and I believe Mark as well, Mark von Olen. So it's this Thursday at 7 o'clock, the Path of the Darksaber on the Thursday watch along. That being said, thank you very much, guys. Once again, really appreciate your time and chatting with us and getting to know you a bit better. And hopefully we get to see you in person at Celebration. Look forward to that. So thank you very much, Joe and Brian.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again. It was a pleasure.
See you soon.